Okay, now we're going. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, so today is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020, and we're covering the bladder official. Does anyone recall the title in charge of the bladder official? Anybody remember?
Is it the drainer of the dregs? Or is that
Oh, but
large
you're
intestine?
close. That is in the lower jowl. That's the large intestine.
That's the large intestine.
But
What
it
is
does drain, right? It does
it?
drain the urine. It deals with the waterways. Yep. And it does drain the urine, which is the liquid dregs, you could say. So it's close. So the bladder official is it's a reservoir. Yes, indeed. So they say it's responsible. It's the official responsible for regions and cities, right? So what does that mean, regions and cities? So the cities are the areas of great activity. That's like the organ system. And then the regions are kind of like the suburbs and the rural areas, which don't have a whole lot of activity, but are important nonetheless. So that would be like um, your upper chest cavity. That might be your shoulder. That might be your hip, your back, your legs, your arms, your hands, your fingers. Like maybe like way out in in Podunkville of the little finger, right? So the regions and cities is basically, the empire, the kingdom. And it says that the transformation of the breaths, which refers to chi, uh, transformation of breath stems from this, which give out their power. So basically, what they're implying is that there's something about the bladder that's very similar to what we would look at as our local power and light company, like our utilities, right? They make sure that we have the power we need, and that comes from managing the fluids along with a couple of other officials, such as the kidneys and the lungs, right? So it's basically, it's our utilities company, right? It makes sure we have power and light and every aspect of the kingdom, both the cities and the more suburban and rural regions have the power that they need, okay? So the transformation of the breast, that means the management of the organ systems that create and metabolize the chi, then give out their power. So in a sense, it's making sure all the organ systems are able to function. So like that would be like making sure all the departments in the government, have the lights on, have the water, have all the resources that they need to do the job in the management of the human kingdom. All right, so that's basically what that is. It's basically an administration and an organizing of the landscape of the body, the territories of solid land and liquid water, and the organization of the body fluids and the physical terrain, right? So what I've put up on the Canvas site for you is just a little bit of a summary. I know I didn't do this for the small intestine, I think, but I'm going to be doing this for the rest of the officials, which is basically a real quick summary of the functions. So you have that at your fingertips. One of my sort of like little, things that's important to me is to make sure that you have some resources available to you. So when you're in the treatment room or in the clinic first before you graduate, that you've got like these little things that you can quickly refer to that help you, one, help you learn, so you can use them as study aids, and two, like little things that you can kind of keep in your treatment room or maybe keep on your phone or tablet or what have you. So when you're in your office, it's something that you can just kind of like refer back to really quickly and conveniently, right? And the more you refer back, the more you'll learn, right? That's how you learn, right? So this quick summary of the functions is one of the primary aspects of the bladder official, which is really fascinating to me, is that it contains the body fluids, the water, and the urine. And then with the assistance of the kidney chi, it excretes the urine, right? So, in the West, we think of like a container of the body fluids as just the bladder, right? You've just got this like one, muscular pouch that, basically stores the urine there until it can be released. Well, really, along with the spleen and its functions and its capacity to contain things and to hold things in place, right? And they have an interesting co-cycle relationship. Um, the bladder also helps, along with the spleen sheet, to make sure that the fluids are all held in the right place for the right period of time. So it regulates the storage and the utilization of our reserves, in this case, water. And we still, to this day, since time immemorial, we've used water as a source of power, right? The water turns a wheel, the wheel turns whatever, either, a mill, like a grist millstone, or, what have you, right? Whatever that, or a pump for the water, for the well, right? Um, as well as now it moves turbines which generate electricity, okay, which I think is quite interesting. And so one of the things it also possibly regulates through the subtle fluid system in the central nervous system, working with the nerve cells, is it may perhaps regulate the sympathetic nervous system and our ability to fight or flight, or the fight or freeze response, right? So if you think about like the waterways going all through the body, mind, spirit, all through the terrain of our body, it really looks like the circulatory system that's managed by the heart and pericardium. And it also looks like the central nervous system that's managed by the water and the gallbladder, right, as marrow. So it's this sense of also like this chi network that moves through the entire system, right? And so one possibility is that the bladder in particular has a network very similar to our central nervous system, and it may be under that domain, which, if you think about it, makes a lot of sense, because the water is about our ability to respond to threat, and our ability to go into some kind of strategic motion, but at a very primal reactive level, right? Like wood, heart, earth, they tend to think more about things. They're not as quick to react. The large intestine, the bladder, they're very primal. They just react, right? So a lot of and also, just dealing with the fight or flight response is a fear-motivated, threat-motivated response, which is under the domain of the water, the bladder being the yang official of the water. So it isn't about ability to be still in the presence of fear. It's the ability to move and be active and escape that threat in the presence of fear, right? Think about a deer, prey animals, right? So we believe that it may have a strong influence over the sympathetic nervous system, right? And that leads us into the mind, which it empowers the manifestation of our resourcefulness and cleverness. A long time ago, there used to be this show called MacGyver, and this guy was really clever and resourceful, and he'd find himself in some dangerous situation, or trapped in some basement somewhere, or some cell, and with like a paper clip, a shoelace, and a rubber band, he'd escape. It was pretty crazy, but it shows like how clever and resourceful he was. And so he's sort of like my poster child of the bladder official. I can't think of anybody, but if anybody thinks a more modern current equivalent, I think that would be great. But somebody who can really make do with just about anything. They, like, anybody who has a basement in this area knows that like water finds its way, right? It's so clever. It will find like the tiniest little crack. It will find it, and it will persevere, and it will persist, right? And it will seep its way into your basement, right? And that's the power of water, right? Like create the Colorado River, creating the Grand Canyon. Little by little, it just like wears things down. And in the Tao Te Ching, they talk about the softest substance is the hardest substance, right? And that's water. So it always finds a way through, right? And so in a way that relates to like our capacity and our mental capacity to be persistent, to not give up, right? To keep going, to persevere, right? And find the way through whatever obstacle. And that's how the bladder works sort of with the gallbladder, because the bladder and the water, they kind of work more on like instinct. Same with the metal. It has a very instinctual process. It's not quite as thoughtful. It just like has this sense. It's like waiting for the opening, right? And so the bladder, similarly, the official, is what helps to illuminate our brain mind, right? That sits at the crown of our central nervous system, and all of the sensory organs are placed around this big ball of marrow, right? And so it manages, just like it manages the power and light, it manages the sensory input. And that's why it's so closely related to the small intestine, because the bladder relates, without any kind of thought. It's all completely reactive. It's all primal. We see things, we hear things, we taste things, we smell things. You don't have to think about it. You may think about how to interpret it, like, I wonder how I would identify that, right? That's now the wood coming into play, to put a name on it, right? But you hear that you're walking through the woods, or you're walking through a parking garage, and then you hear maybe that twig snap, or you hear maybe somebody like kick a tin can, like a soda can, and you're like, right? You're wary. You've heard something that's gotten your attention, right? And so it's stimulated that sort of primal predator-prey nervous system response in your brain. And then combined with the yin marrow and the essence, which comes from the kidney, and the yang shen of the heart, this allows us to, when we're not in reaction to some threat response, when we're actually able to settle and be present to ourselves, to be present to the essence of our kidney, our jing, right? That means we know who we are, and that gives us wisdom. And then combined with our sense of able to be self-aware, which comes from the shen of the heart, then we're able to radiate our gifts and our strengths, right? And that's potentiated by our jing, and then that's sent out into the world. So as a yang fu official, right? Just like the small intestine we covered last time, that's about taking the virtues that are stored, that are potentiated in the yin official, and then manifesting them out into the world, taking them out into the world through some kind of action, right? That's the fu's job, right? And then in terms of the spirit, it enables the application of our zhi will in the world to thrive and excel, not just survive. So the kidney gives us the impulse to survive, and the lower aspects of our central nervous system allow us to survive. But the fu officials, and the bladder in particular, takes our inner strengths, which are our virtues, our inner power, our ability to persevere, our ability to persist, right? To continue on. That allows our zhi will to go out and actually make something happen, right? And again, nothing works all on its own. I mean, every official is always working to some degree in combination with another official. Nobody goes it alone, right? And that's the great lesson from Chinese medicine about how to be in life. You can't just go it alone. Nobody picks themselves up off the ground from their, by lifting themselves up off their own bootstraps. That's a juvenile adolescent fantasy, right? Also born of somebody who is insecure, by the way. So, that's somebody who actually has maybe kind of like a weak sense of water, right? I don't have to rely on anybody. And that's BS. Everybody relies on everybody else, right? I didn't create Zoom. I didn't set this up. I didn't build my own laptop, right? I'm not making the electricity come into my house, right? So, but what the bladder helps us to do is to take what we feel compelled to move towards in our being, in a primal, uncontrollable way, to take that impulse, right? I am interested in this. I love that. I am this way, and I can't help but being this way. So I'm going to move in this way. And then the bladder helps us to organize that and to apply that zhi will into the world to make something beautiful or make something powerful and effective manifest in the world. All right, any questions about that? Okay. So, you guys know enough about water. I don't feel like I need to go into all the themes of water and the kidney and bladder. Those are pretty obvious, deals with the winter, the cold, and things like that. So when you're thinking about these points, just like on any meridian, you have to look at the points in a context. And the context is the elemental correspondences, which include the climate that resonates, the emotions, both positive and negative, that resonate, the season and the qualities of the seasons, right? So, you have to understand that the water points are very effective because of their relationship, and they are a manifestation of the resonance of the winter time, the resonance of the dark, it's more dark than light. It's a more yin time of year, like the earth is becoming a seed. The movement is a contraction and concentration, right? So this helps us to manage that movement in our life in an effective way on a body, mind, spirit level. So all the points are always looked at in context of the element and in context of the functions of the officials. So the more you learn the functions of the officials, the better you understand how the points are used, are gateways to access different functional aspects of the officials to help them carry out their functions and transformations in the world on a body, mind, spirit level. Okay. All right, so just an overview of the entire channel. Bladder 1 through bladder 10, right? So that's just the ones on the head, right? From the inner canthus of the eye to the occiput. This is where the heavenly yang influences, both from within and without, are activated and illuminated. And what they activate and illuminate is actually the virtues of our potential stored within our jing. So what does that mean? So very briefly, that might refer to revelation. It might refer to like what's called a flash of genius, insight, right? In Arabic, there's a great word called tajalli. It's sort of like a revelation. It's like a flash. It's like when the lightning hits the water and something is illuminated. And what that illuminates is our inner wisdom, our inner guidance, right? You may have some insight that comes from deep within you, based on who you are and what you've experienced in the world, right? That's your jing, right? Combined with, the shen of your own water, right? Which is your will, right? Which has put you at a certain place at a certain time, which is also assisted by the shen of the heart, right? And this allows you to all of a sudden go, ooh, like when the light bulb goes off, like that's one of the main functions of like bladder 1 through 10. It really helps us to wake up to what's inside us that's often hidden. Again, water, like that corresponds with the seed that's under the ground. You can't see the seed. Like, oh, I wonder if it's growing. You can't just keep digging it up and looking at it. You'll kill the seed. So there's always some aspect of water that must be hidden, right? And that can be frustrating for our minds. But given time and patience, right, and the willingness to sit in the quiet, in the relatively dark, right, that's introspection, right? Then all of a sudden, that creates space for this seed to sprout, okay? And then all of a sudden, like the eyes of our eyes open, the ears of our ears open, right? The mind of our mind opens, and then we get these wise insights. Right? Bladder 11 through 35, right? So that's from the torso, from the top of the torso, right at the top of the trapezius muscles, all the way down to the base of the sacrum near the coccyx. These are sort of like your mundane regulatory functions of metabolism. These points help regulate the qi that emerges from our essence, right, which supports all the physiological functions of our officials and the Zangfu organs, right? So this is about living in a way that fosters the manifestation of our physical potential, right? You have to activate your qi to get something done, right? And then, so Worsley's 36 through 49, and then TCM's bladder 41 through 54. These regulate the chi of the 5 Shen spirits, right? These are like the outer bladder line points that are in alignment with the inner bladder line points of the AEPs, right? Did you guys learn these? Did you learn like the points though? Like in point location?
We learned the inner bladder line.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. So basically the outer bladder line points, I mean, you know, you guys seen the diagram. They're in Worsley, and I mean, they're in Deadman, they're all the charts. So you've got like the inner bladder line coming down, you know, 1.5 Sun lateral in Deadman, 2 Sun in Worsley. And then the outer bladder line starts at the medial edge of the scapulae, right? So here's the spine, then there's the inner bladder line, and then there's the medial edges of the scapula. And then just inside of that comes down the outer bladder line. And this is either 36 through 49 or 41 through 54. And at the level of each of the AEPs, which you of course have learned, there's also a point that relates to that same Zangfu organ, and that has to do with the Shen spirits of that particular Zang or Fu organ. And so these regulate the chi of our 5 Shen spirits, and this supports the manifestation of our greatest virtues, right? So, you know, the virtue of your Po, the virtue of your heart Shen, the virtue of, you know, your Hun, your Yi, your Je, right? So this is, these support us in aligning with the Tao to achieve our highest aspirations. So what does that mean? That's a nice fancy term, but what does that mean? It means that you're awake enough to have a good, clear sense of who you are, but we're never fully aware of our potential, but we are aware of what we love and what we are interested in and what's important to us. So when you live in a way that honors what's important to you, you follow your principles, you follow your values. That is going to create an internal resonance with your chi that's going to be very clean and correct. And the radiance that then projects out into the Tao, into the world around you. And again, everything is like a radar, right? That's going to bounce off of life and send things back to you that helps you to continue that process of inner evolution and elevation, right? So in a way, it kind of shows up as stuff keeps happening in a way that helps you to forge the highest aspects of yourself. Like if you say, hey, you know, I'm going to focus on patience, right? Then you sure as sure as we're all sitting here, you will be stuck in traffic. As sure as I'm sitting here, you're going to be standing in line at a bank, right? There's going to be something immediately that's going to support your cultivation of patience, right? You're not going to cultivate your patience. You know, maybe what's cultivating your patience is having to sit here in front of your computer listening to me, right? right? But it's like, oh my God, when is this going to end, right? So you're welcome. Glad to be of service, right? So you can't cultivate patience. You can't cultivate strength, you know, sitting in your room meditating, right? You're not going to do it when everything in life is easy for you. So what you have to do is then you have to adopt the inner experience of everything that is happening to you. You don't have to. I'm just suggesting your life will be a lot more interesting and happier if you do it. Trust me, I know. Right? Because when I was younger, I was at war with everything. So, but if you treat everything that comes to you, and again, like sometimes I forget this myself, but if you treat everything that comes to you as an opportunity to cultivate what's important to you, to cultivate your inner qualities, then you can have a lot more fun with it, right? My wife is phenomenally brilliant at this. Like she's really good at this. So she reminds me all the time, like, hey, remember? I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay, cool. Right. So the bladder and the kidney are particularly involved with this experience in life, right? Because it manages your senses, it manages your central nervous system, it manages your inner power, right? Your inner reserve, your resources, which are your fluids, which give you power and strength to help transform the chi, which give you more power and strength. to go out into the world and be somebody, right? That's why water moves into wood, right? Because then we want to figure out who that somebody is, right? That's our identity, right? That's cultivated by your hun, right? Okay. All right.
Pardon me. Can you quickly recap bladder 1 through 10? You said was
Yes.
cantus through occiput. Then you said
So
11.
bladder 1 through 10. Yeah. So that's where we receive the heavenly influences, the heavenly yang influences, sort of metaphorically from the sunlight, from the heavens, right, from outside ourselves, as well as from inside ourselves, to illuminate the virtues of our potential that are stored within the jing of the kidneys.
I understand. Right? I just wanted to review all 3 regions.
Yeah.
The middle was the associative effective points, and the third region was what?
And the third region is, the command points, which we're going to cover, which is like how you move through the journey of your life with wisdom and insight and cleverness and power and effectiveness.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 9:30. Make sure you get up and stretch. Okay, any questions about the official in particular? Okay. Anybody get treated often in water?
I have.
I have too.
Mm-hmm.
I have.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So yeah, if at any point you guys want to like just jump in and mention something about a particular point that you've had, would love to hear it. Maybe that, why the practitioner, chose that point, or, a particular effect it might have had for you. Even if you don't know, if you just suspect like, oh, I had, this was going on, I had this done, certainly love to hear at some point. Just either jump in or mention it in the chat. All right. So, excuse me. With most of the meridians, I'd like to start at the Jingwell point and then work up towards the Hesi point. So I'd like to start with bladder 67, reaching yin or extremity of yin. So again, like every other point, I want you to think about the different point categories that resonate with or that are attributed to each of these points. So bladder 67 is the exit point. It's the metal point. It's a Jingwell point, right? Because if this were the pinky, it's right at the tip. And so as such, that's going to impart certain qualities of being to the understanding of this point, right? So obviously, as the metal point on a water channel, it's the tonification point when you tonify it. Jingwell points are traditionally bled with a hot needle. So you would heat the needle up, and then you would kind of zap the point to draw out about what they say 10 drops of blood. So it's a well point, so you want to pump it. So what you would do is you would take one finger over the nail and the other over the pad, and you would pump, like I'm squeezing it like this, right? You would squeeze the point, right, to get the blood up, and then you would take a hot needle and pierce the point, and then squeeze a little drops, about 10 little drops of blood out of the point. So that's because Jingwell points do a number of things that are supported by the bleeding action. So one is it clears heat toxins, right? So almost all Jingwell points, and basically all the Jingwell points that I can think of on the yang meridians, are great at clearing heat, right? So think about why heat might be building up, or what heat might be having an effect on, right? So what is heat? Heat expands, right? So you might have a patient coming in with a lot of headaches. And again, Jingwell points, the exit points, especially on the yang meridians, have a profound effect on the opposite end of the channel. Why? Because the yang meridians, the opposite end, start and end on the head. particularly around the face, right? The yin begin and end on the chest, right? Which makes sense, right? This is the yin area, this is the yang area. So these have a particular profound effect on the senses, right? And in particularly the effect of the senses that are related to its ordinarily corresponding sense organ, in this case the ears, or the opposite end of the channel, in this case bladder 1, right? So, you know, the opposite end of the channel is this whole area over here, right? So like in terms of imaging, the end of the hand could be the tippy top of the head, right? So it could be, that's why it says, oh, first thing, vertex headaches. Why is that? Because this is like, if you image the head, neck, and torso onto the limbs, right? And if this were your foot, right? This would be the tippy top of your head, right? Because you'd hold your extremity up like that, right? And so, you know, around the groin would be around the pelvis region. So first thing it says, vertex headache, occipital headaches, right? That's at the other end of the channel, right? So what happens if too much heat or fluids, right, which the bladder helps to manage, build up in the head, we have pain, right? Fluid builds up, that creates pressure. Heat expands and builds up, that creates pressure, right? So this is a great point to bleed when there's a lot of physical pressure and pain at the opposite end of the channel. It's the metal point, so it's very tonifying and clarifying. Excuse me. Also, some of the indications you'll read are like congestion, you know, nasal congestion, things that are like obstructions in the head, right? And this is actually a great point to treat along with small intestine 1, which is right here. It's Taiyang complement at the beginning stages of the disease of a cold or flu, right? The beginning stages of disease, right? The Taiyang is that first stage, right? That's our outermost zone, right? So any type of harassing wind and cold, again, water element, helps us to manage cold, but can be damaged by cold, right? Because what happens to liquids when they're exposed to too much cold, they freeze, right? And when they freeze, they become inert, they're unusable. So this is a great point for people who come in on a body, mind, spirit level, that maybe they've got a lot of headaches that are characterized by like a lot of pressure, right? Congestion, like a sinus headache, for example. You don't have to bleed this point. You can tonify it, right? And I would encourage you to needle all the Jingwell points in the direction of the flow, which is like outwards. That was just the way I was taught by Jeffrey Yuen. And he said that these points are really basically powerful expellers and dispellers of pathogenic factors. So you don't really want to aim the needle back up towards the channel, towards the interior of the body. You always want to aim it outwards, so you're pushing something out, right? And so on a body level, they may have a lot of congestion or symptoms of like a lot of pressure in the opposite end of the channel. This is good for clearing a lot of heat also, right? So heat can damage the mind. It can make us a little bit manic. It can make us very unsettled, right? So if you combine that with an already like heightened nervous system, right? Because like if we're agitated, you know, we're always aware of a threat. We can't settle. So that's like the person sitting there and they're always like tapping their foot on the floor, right? They seem very nervous. They seem very agitated, right? They're not able to kind of settle. So it could be that agitation is now affecting their Shen, and that, you know, deals with the heart, small intestine, and that destabilizes the mind. So somebody is like constantly nervous. You know, a lot of people are becoming anxious. I just had a telehealth visit, excuse me, with one of my patients last night. She suffers some severe anxiety. It's been really delightfully under control. I do treat her on bladder and kidney. Interestingly enough, she was just diagnosed with MS, which is a demyelinizing condition affecting the nerves, right? So this is like a real water type. I'm not saying all water CFs are prone to MS, and I'm not saying everyone with MS is a water CF, but all the people I've treated on for MS have all been water CFs, which I think is fairly interesting. So, so now she's really anxious because, she hears that like, people who've been diagnosed with MS are more susceptible to, as an autoimmune disorder, they're more susceptible to COVID-19. So now she's like freaking out about that, right? So, I had her actually stick her thumbnail in this point and jab it like really hard. And I taught her how to like clean it properly and get a lancet and maybe even squeeze a few drops of blood out. So she's going to get back to me tomorrow and see how that went, right? So this is a great point to help people who are like kind of like manic, unsettled, very nervous, and they don't even know about what. This is the thing about water and water CFs. Maybe some of you are water CFs. Like, you ask them like what they're afraid of and they don't even really know. I mean, their mind kind of comes up with some ideas about like that are like socially acceptable ideas, but deep down they're not really sure why they're afraid, right? Or why they're nervous. It's just this pervasive state because the central nervous system is just constantly in this intense state of humming. So on a spirit level, what's the antidote to all of that? Knowing who you are and focusing on what's really important to you. And that's your values. That's your essence, right? That's what makes you valuable and worthwhile, right? So if you can keep connecting to that, you'll see that these virtues are a resource that will allow you to be clever and adaptable and persevere in any situation, because no one can plan for everything. You just can't. And so this is a great point for people who are exhausting themselves trying to plan for every contingency, right? Because they want that, right? That they want to be able to take that deep, heavy breath that allows them to relax. Water CFs have a hard time relaxing. Or on the flip side, they're so addicted to relaxing that they're never able to really be active and take the necessary preparations, right? Oh, God, I forgot to put gas in my car again. Damn. Now I was already late. Now I'm going to be even more late. And so now they get like all even more like, oh God, I'm now in a hurry, right? And then, so like the people who seem like their life is constantly like they're running around like nuts because they're not able to like keep track of things. That's the small intestine working with the bladder, and a lot of disorganization, a lot of like wasted time and energy, right? So these are people who waste a lot of time and energy because they can't take a breath and settle, right? So that's the type of patient this is good for. Any questions about that? Fluid buildup for the brain tumor. Brain tumors are more often than not, I think, they're sometimes related to blood fluids, but also body fluids, but also blood fluids. So I would say yes. It could also have a lot to do with like the liver and the gallbladder and the congealing of the blood. So, but it could definitely have brain tumors could definitely be under the auspices of the water. So we can talk more about that offline. Yeah. All right. So bladder 66, another just awesome point. Foot connecting valley, also known as penetrating valley. This is a classical point for burning urination, right? So as the next step in the journey towards the Hussey point, you've got the Ying string point. It's the water point. It's also the Harari point when you do it either in the season or in the proper time, right? Does anybody remember the time for the bladder? When is the bladder dominant? No one knows.
Is it 3 to 5?
3 to 5.
3 to 5, yes. Yeah, heart's 11 to 1, small intestines 1 to 3, bladder's 3 to 5. So this is typically a time when the rest of the civilized world goes home and takes a nap, but not us, right? So, this is a time, so the normal ebb and flow of our chi, right, comes and goes. So you'll notice that some of you, anybody wake up at 3 in the morning? A few of you? Yeah, that's good. That's not unhealthy. That's not unhealthy. That's not pathology, right? Because that's actually the chi is coming to a peak. And so oftentimes people will wake up at that time. And frankly, every organized spiritual tradition on the planet wakes up around that time to meditate or pray. And there's a reason for that, right? That's the long time. That's when the veils between the seen and the unseen are at their thinnest, right? So similarly, 3 to 5 is when our energy kind of starts to tank. Now, you could take a Red Bull or whatever else, and that would be unwise, right? Because now you're going against the natural tide of the ebb and flow of your chi. So this is that's a great time to do like bladder 66. That's when it's like technically the Harari point, when you can stimulate all the virtues of the water within this point in a really powerful way, right? So this could be for somebody who has a lot of heat physically in the lower jiao, which leads to burning urination. Maybe combined with some liver points, you could do this for people who have like very bright red menstrual blood when they bleed extremely heavily, and there might even be some burning pain along with menstruation. This is really good for people who are, there's a lot of heat still stuck in the head. You can combine this with bladder 67 or just do bladder 66. So a lot of the itises that affect the face, rhinitis, sinusitis, oculitis, I don't know, I just made that up. But when your eyes are dry and red and itchy, I call it oculitis. You know, they say it's also for like a sudden loss of voice. I don't know about that. I think as the metal point, it's sometimes ascribed to that, but I think more like the Ying River points are better for that. Let's see. So a lot of coughing, right? A lot of like the catching in the throat, right? A patient who has a lot of that, like it feels like there's a lot of fluids in there, so you can combine it with some earth points, like especially stomach, to move the fluids out of the throat, right? I think it's also a really good point to do when somebody's like, you know, chronically dealing with a fever, has a hard time breaking a fever. Now, again, you don't want to like just put ice on their head to like remove the fever that way, right? You want nature to take its course. So you want to help the body to move the heat out of the system, right? In a natural way, right? So as the metal point on a more mental emotional level, this is, or excuse me, as a water point on a mental emotional level, this is for somebody who has like long-standing fear, maybe somebody who's still experiencing the residual effects of a very intense, frightening experience. Think about PTSD or some kind of shock to their mental emotional system that really they've never been the same since. You know, maybe so after you've done IDs and EDs, this is a really great point to help people reconnect to their inner sense of power and that inner reassurance, because nobody reassures a water CF except a water CF, right? Or except themselves. So this is a nice point to help connect them to their inner courage, and that helps them to relax a little bit more and to begin to trust, because water CFs aren't going to trust anything, right? They're not just going to take your word for it. You know, if they did, then they're not a water CF, right? They have to discover the power of their own intuition and their own inner guidance and inner wisdom. And so if you can help illuminate that with the use of this point and through your words and guidance to help them practice connecting to their inner wisdom, their inner guidance, their inner intuition, then they'll little by baby steps more and more be able to trust themselves. So this is a nice point to kind of activate the resonance that resonates at the frequency of like their inner wisdom. So you're kind of waking the inner wisdom up out of its dormancy. And you're not really, I mean, it's always there and it's always broadcasting and it's always available for us to hear it, but we can't hear it because we're so busy being freaked out about all this other stuff. That's why we can't hear our inner wisdom, right? Because our mind is too occupied on all these other potential threats and ruminating on, you know, what's to come. Well, I don't know what's going to happen next, right? So if you spend all your time thinking about that, you're not going to be able to connect to, all right, let me just go back inside and just be with the space, be with the nothingness, be with the fear, and just, you know, make space for all of that. It's just a sensation. And then the insights will begin to come, right? So this helps to settle people down on a physical level by clearing the heat that's agitating the mind, that's agitating the spirit, by clearing the toxins that build up in the lower jiao, which corrupt the power and light company. So we're not getting all the resources we need to do the job of being ourselves, right? And all these things are obstacles that get in the way with our connecting to what's already there, which is that quiet, still, embodied wisdom that gives us a sense of like quiet impulse towards something, right? Never away from something, more towards something, right? All right, so bladder 65. This is restraining bone or bone binder. I kind of like the name bone binder better. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Or bundle bone, but it's also known as restraining bone. I'm not sure why it's called restraining bone. I think restructuring bone might be better, or remodeling bone is better. So this is the wood point, and also the sedation point when you sedate it. So as its name suggests, this helps the remodeling phase and the knitting phase of the bone, right? So this actually helps the bones to heal faster, and, or at least as fast as nature will allow. Let's put it that way. It's not going to accelerate nature, but it will help the body bypass a lot of the obstacles to reknitting bone. You know, so person might come in with a stress fracture or an actual broken bone from some kind of traumatic accident, right? And so this is a fantastic point. And if they break their foot, just treat the other side, right? This is a fantastic point to help bone reknit itself and to heal faster. It really is wonderful. This is a classical point for lower back pain, like lumbar pain of the lower back region. And that's because where it sits on the foot, and as the shoestring point, right, it's the third of these 5 antique points. As the shoestring point, it has the capacity to move, not as much as she cleft points, but it has a powerful capacity to move and clear things that are obstructing the channel. And in this case, dealing with a water official, it deals with cold, right? So again, cold, everything can transform into its opposite, right? So with the first 2 points, you've got some kind of cold or wind invasion that's been trapped in for a period of time or harassing, and then the Wei Qi is fighting against it, either if it's some kind of external pathogenic factor, and then the Wei Qi starts to fight it, and that battle between the Wei Qi and the pathogen, that generates heat, right? But it can also, over time, like our diet, inactivity, or we overtax ourselves. And if you overtax yourself and overwork, you're gonna wear down and wear up and use up the resources that you have. And one of those resources is your fluids and your yin, right? And then cold will predominate, right? Or a person's diet may be very unnourishing, right? They may not get the food or water that they need, the adequate nourishment. So the power and light company can't operate at full capacity, right? So people are going to lose power. And one of the classic places is cold settles on bone is a very dense structure. So it's not going to be, it doesn't store a lot of heat, right? It stores, it's like concretized water. It's like frozen water. That's sort of like what bone is, right? And so what does cold do? Cold settles to the bottom, right? So it might settle to the bottom of a vertebrae, but it might settle to the bottom of the whole spinal column. And where is it going to accumulate? Around the sacrum and the lumbar region, right? And then also combined with any kind of kidney deficiency, it's going to show up in the low back. So this is a great point for people who have overtax themselves, right? To strive to manifest their will, right? Think about like overachievers, people who are like overly ambitious, captains of industry, people who are willing to like, think about people like Elon Musk, or like a lot of NASA astronauts, right? Who like are so driven by their will to achieve greatness, to manifest their potential, like at all costs. So they're Jing and Qi, like they overtax themselves. And so one of the first places that shows up is in the low back. So this is a very typical indication for people who are overtaxing their Jing and overtaxing their Yin and their kidney Qi. And over time, that's going to affect the bones. It's going to affect the ligaments, right? The things that give us stability and strength, okay? Similarly, that also still to some degree affects the opposite side of the channel. So this still can be good for like occipital headaches, headaches in the front, well, not really so much the front, more like around the eyes, and stiffness, right? Because cold contracts and it makes things stiff, right? So how will you know, well, how will I know this is like a water issue and not a whatever issue? Well, one, they're going to be a water CF that you're treating, or someone that you suspect to be a water CF, or whatever they are dealing with gets better with heat, right? So as the wood point, this is also really effective, I think, not just to help, again, what does wood provide? It provides a plan. So that provides the plan and the structure for the bone to re-knit, right? It gives the body, mind, spirit, it's like the architect that gives it the blueprint to remodel the bone. Similarly, on a mental emotional level, it gives us the capacity to get in touch with our ability to make plans to ease our experience of uncertainty. Now, again, that old saying, if you want to make God laugh, draw up plans, right? Right? And there's a great quote by Mike Tyson. I used to think about this when I was practicing martial arts. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Now, again, I'm not saying like, but your reality may not be an actual fist. It may be like your car breaking down, or tuition going up, or COVID-19 forcing us all to stay in our house, right? That might be, the equivalent of the fist to your face that life is sending you, right? So, you have to be flexible. So also like, you don't want to, like water CFs can become a little bit obsessed, not in like a earthy way where they go round and round and round in their thoughts, but they become, it's almost like this OCD, like, well, it's done this way and it has to be done this way or else, right? So this is a really good point to help people be a little bit more flexible in one sense, and they're not so like absolutely attached to moving through life like this steamroller according to their own, inner guidance, which is really their own inner fear. But also on the other side helps people to be able to actually generate a plan, so they're not just like, water spilling across the table, right? Or water flooding out over the land. Now that can be very fertile over time, but it's not very powerful. So if you want to generate power towards a goal, it has to be restrained. Maybe that's the restraining of the bone, right? It has to have a plan. It has to have a goal. It has to have a purpose, right? So this is really a good point for helping people who are feeling kind of like lost and ineffective and impotent in life. Like they've got all of these virtues and powers, like what, think about like, well, he had such great potential, but he really just pissed it all away, right? Or people who have a lot of resources at their disposal, not just inner virtues and abilities, but like money, intelligence, things like that. And they just kind of piss it away. So this is a good point to help people refocus, reconnect to a goal that's right for them and their Jing, right? And to activate and move towards that. All right, just a little more and then we'll take another break. So bladder 64, capital bone or central bone, right? So this is the source point. It's It represents the capital. This is where all the activity is happening. This is where all the action is, right? So this connects to the original yuan source qi, right? Which is sort of represented by the organ itself. So in a sense, all the source points are able to be like this lowest common denominator point, where they activate in a very gentle, subtle way every single characteristic and functional quality of every point on the meridian, right? It does like it like helps to tap into all the basic functions of the bladder on the body, mind, spirit level. And so this is why it's like such a powerful point. And it deals with the original yuan source qi, which actually has a very close relationship with the water, because Ming Men, that starts in between the two kidneys. And then it's the bladder that brings that essence, that turns that qi of the Jing into like essence qi and brings it up the inner bladder line and deposits it at the AEPs. And we'll discuss more about this on another video. But basically, this is what helps us to tap into our original source qi. So on a physical level, it helps us to do life the way we were built to do life, and helps us to reconnect to our inner power, which may be different than your inner power or someone else's inner power. There's this guy, I can't remember, I think his name was Peterson. He's a psychologist and a researcher, and he's done like, I think something like 12 steps to life or something like that. You can find it on YouTube. Anyway, he mentioned something that I thought was really notable, which was never compare yourself to another person. Compare yourself now to who you used to be. I thought that was really a powerful statement, like, because my old man used to say, never compare your inside to other people's outside, because you don't know how crappy their inside is. You don't know what they're dealing with, right? You don't know what they're wrestling with. But I like the idea of comparing who you are now to who you were in the past, because that speaks to the evolution and the manifestation of your potential over time, right? So attention plus time plus chi equals self-cultivation and wisdom, right? So if you start to explore and pay attention to who you are and what your nature is, what your natural nature is, and then you take the time to do that for a period of time, and then you apply your chi, your energy, to manifesting that potential, like to bringing that out into the world, you know, that's what at the end of the equation yields wisdom. So this is a nice point, you know, for all of the physical indications, which are really like most of the same physical indications of bladder, which is like it helps to clear cold out of the channel. It helps to bring the chi down that's stuck in the head because of like cold and wind, kind of like freezing it in place in the upper jiao, right, which is the head, the neck, the shoulders, right? So that's why it's always good for like stiffness, splitting headache, you know, pain or discomfort, or, you know, or disorders around the eyes, visuals, dizziness. Like all these things point to wind and cold harassing the head. Like in the first bullet of indications in Deadman, this is all about wind, cold, harassing the head, right? So all the normal symptoms you would normally experience, like, you know, pressure headache, fixed pain, stiffness, feelings of cold, shaking, visual dizziness and obstruction, you know, the wind cold getting into the cavities of the sinuses, creating congestion, like freezing things in place. Also, it's still a little heat clearing because it's down on the foot. So, you know, long-standing chronic, like, what do you call it? Manic depressive qualities, right? Any kind of pathogenic wind or cold. But on a mental emotional level, this is really a nice point to remind people of what they have in store within them, right? Which is almost unnameable, right? It has to be experienced to really be understood. So just to help people to kind of settle, reconnect back to their source, right? Reconnect to the capacity to even begin to examine or wonder who I really am. Because some people don't, you know, they don't even know how to do that, right? So this might be where you start them on some kind of meditative exercise, which could be a walking meditation. Doesn't have to be sitting still and quietly, right? So this helps them get back to themselves, which is really nice. All right. Let's take a, just like a break till 10 after. Is that okay? Come back at 10 after, finish up. All right. So starting with bladder 63, Golden Gate. So Jin Men is, it's interesting that like the metal element is called the metal element because once upon a time when they were referring to metal, whoever they were, the ancients, they were actually referring to gold. So if you think about, because not all metals are the same, right? I mean, you've got titanium, you've got gold, you've got lead, you've got aluminum, but gold in particular was sort of as seen as like the, what do you call it? Like the representative of metal, like the epitome of metal, because it is so malleable, right? It melts easily. It's much more malleable at, not such terribly high temperatures. It's not like you have to, not like lead or, iron, right? So when you think about metal, often think about gold, not just because of the gold color, which is interesting because as you move down from the Sheng cycle, like, it's a golden metal, right? But it is very shiny. It is very cold to the touch, right? It doesn't hold much heat, but it's malleable and it's valuable. And so it can be transformed very readily, similar to copper. It can be transformed rather readily. And that was one of the aspects of metal, was its ability to be molded, its malleability, its ability, to be melted down and used in so many different ways, right? Excuse me. So it's very, it has this underlying current of transformability, right? Which is interesting because, like, in a sense, like it represented the body in solid form, because, I can't really like change my hand, but I can move it into different positions, right, and postures. So it's malleable, right? Our body is a little bit malleable. We can work it in a way that makes it more useful, right? So if I'm doing something, if I'm like learning an essential skill like juggling, right, that brightens the lives of some 8-year-old or whoever, right? That's valuable, right? Right. So that brings us to this point, which is metal gate. So on a physical level, G clef points in general are said to be good for acute situations of B obstruction, which means we're acute situations of stagnation, chi and blood stasis, that's causing pain, right? So this is very applicable in that sense, right? So anybody who has pain along the channel, pain somewhere along the trajectory or the zone of the bladder or the tai yang, this is a really good point, especially when it's for an acute situation, right? Because it clears the obstacles of the stagnant blood and qi from the channel. So likewise, on a mental emotional level, this is a point that I often use for a patient who comes in with these sort of intractable obstacle thoughts, right? These limiting thoughts that have created obstacles in their life that prevent them from manifesting their will, their heart's desires, right? Like what they feel like they're put on earth to do. Or maybe there's something blocking their capacity to even like connect with that, right? So this might include excessive fear of the unknown, constant sense of uncertainty and inability to trust themselves, not just trust their decisions and their judgment, but just a deep sense that like they don't have the power or strength or wisdom or whatever it takes, fill in the blank, to get what they want done, to have a meaningful life. That something's like always waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? people who are always on this kind of heightened state of, readiness to be disappointed or upset or thwarted in some way or overpowered. This is also a really good point for people who have experienced a lot of oppression in their life, very dominating parents, maybe a dominating figure in their life, maybe a partner, like a life partner who's been very dominating, or to live in a system of government or a culture or a religion or maybe even a cult that's extremely dominating, right? I mean, a lot of cults are defined by having absolute power over you. You don't have your own money. You don't have your own will and volition. You don't have your own resources at your disposal, right? Everything goes towards the collective, and including where you go and what you do and what you think and how you think, right? So people either willingly give this over or it's wrested from them. So this is a nice point for people who are kind of stuck in some situation that resonates with that, right? So this is very liberating. It liberates stuck chi, it liberates stuck blood, stagnant blood. And likewise, it liberates stuck mental chi. And if you think about it on a spirit level, deeply held beliefs, right? Like there's a great movie called Carrie. Now it does get quite violent and graphic towards the end, but if you watch maybe the first half hour, you get a sense of how this mother, terrorizes Sissy Spacek's character. She's a child then. You can see how old this movie is. It's from the 70s. Right? So I'm dating myself. And it was a little bit quite terrifying. But in the beginning, the mother is this very oppressive figure where these deeply held beliefs that, you're a bad person, you're a dirty sinner, and I'm not making a statement about Catholicism or Christianity. I'm just saying you can do this with any religion. You can do this with any belief system, right? Look at the L. Ron Hubbards. What are they, because my mind, I've got Ramadan brain, so my mind is mush. What are they, like Tom Cruise?
Like Scientology?
Scientology, right. Yeah, right. So, I mean, if you don't think this way, we're going to destroy your life. Okay. That's oppressive. That's oppressive. That's pathological. That's not healthy. Right. So this is a great point to help break these spirit beliefs that don't enhance their vitality. I'm not against spiritual beliefs. I'm not against certainty. I'm not against powerful beliefs, but they need to enhance a person's vitality. They need to help them manifest who they are in a powerful way. If they don't do that, they're not in alignment with our Jing. And so this is a nice point to also combine with bladder 23, the AEP of the kidney, as well as bladder 28, the AEP of the bladder, and the outer bladder line point for the bladder that has to do with the the kidney, that has to do with the Jur will, to break these sort of almost muscle memory level blocks that we, these beliefs that we hold in our body so intensely that it's hard to really move. They freeze us in place in our life. And they almost in a way freeze us in place to keep us from maturing. When we're in an infant stage, when we're completely and utterly dependent, we have no power of our own except the magnetism of our own Shen. And thank God for it, because we would all starve, right? Right? Where people are kind of stuck in this phase of their life where they've never been able to really mature. The seed hasn't been allowed to sprout and move and grow in its own direction, right? So this is a great combination of points to give people the boost and the power and the resources, the inner resource to say, you know what, I'm going to live my own life, right? A life that resonates with my Jing, who I am, my inner impulses, my inner loves, my inner strengths, that makes use of my inner gifts. That's my potential, right? So this is a great point for that. People who are really good, this point's really good for, have a feeling in their presence, you feel like their being is very dense. It's kind of stuck, right? Inert. Right? So bladder 62, extending vessel. Great point. This is you're going to learn more about the Shi Jing Ba Mai, the 8 extraordinary vessels. This is the opening point. So there's a master point or an opening point, and then there's a coupled point. So it's like something that opens the door or turns on the switch, and then there's another point that keeps the switch open, right? That keeps the circuit open. So bladder 62. So if this is like the fibula coming down, and then here's like the lateral malleolus or malleolus, I don't know how to pronounce it, right? So bladder 62 is sort of like right there, right? And what I like to do is I like to actually angle it up, angle it up behind the malleolus. If you can get up in there, if you can get up all in that business, that is a great reservoir of qi to help sort of explode open the yang chao mai and to help keep open the du mai. And these are 8 extraordinary vessels that have a lot to do with our spine. Yeah, go figure, right? Not surprising. And our vertebrae and the spinal column. So on a physical level, these are points that are often done for problems in the area of like L5, S1, the sacrum, you know, the base of the vertebrae. And I really, if you can, like needle between the tendons to go up behind it. And if you hit a lot of resistance, stop. Like don't keep going, right? Re-angle it. You should feel a nice, easy space to go into. It should not be painful for the patient. If it's painful for the patient, it's not in the right spot. And this is a great point for the ligaments. It's extended vessels. So this is referring to the dumai that extends, you know, from earth to heaven, right? That's your spinal column. And that's what provides the structure. That's almost like your fundamental beliefs. These are like your rock solid beliefs. Like this is what creates your ability to kind of stand up and be erect and strong in the world. And I would really recommend, it's kind of hard for me to do it in this chair, but I would highly recommend that when you're driving, when you're walking around, even if you're walking around your house, take a moment to bring your sacrum a little forward, bring your hips a little forward, bring your shoulders a little back, and move your head back and up to see what it's like to maintain an erect posture and walk around like that. You don't want to be stiff. Again, cold, wind, they stiffen, right? So bladder meridian points are the antidote for cold wind stiffness, right? Almost every point on this channel is going to help you in some way deal with wind cold or wind cold that's, you know, fighting against the wei qi and is now creating a lot of heat, or heat trapped in the bladder, right? That's agitating the shin and destroying you know, real estate, right? Heat is deteriorating. Heat destroys tissue, right? So, but see what it's like to like walk around and feel like this vessel that's extending into the heavens, right? Because you are this vessel, right? That contains your spirit. And so this is a nice point, you know, for all the physical stuff, right? Benefits the wind in the eyes. Why? Wind cold harassing the head. Calms the spirit and treats epilepsy. So there's some kind of like wind cold trapped in the nervous system that's turned into heat over time chronically, and that heat is now becoming agitated. And that's when they talk about calming the shin. Anytime they're talking about calming the shin, they're talking about some kind of climatic factor that is harassing the mind because it's become chronic, right? And it does activate the channel and alleviate pain. How? By moving wind cold out of the channel, right? So almost all of these points have a very powerful effect on that. But this is a great point to help people to extend themselves into the world, even into their own world, right? Which means penetrating insight, sending their shen, their brain-mind focus into their own body to connect to what's happening with this thing, and then how do I use it appropriately to manifest my will. So this point has a lot to do with how we extend ourselves out into the world to others, right? And how we use our limbs. You know, how do we stand strong in the midst of like these powerful forces in life? All right, so 61, servant's aid. It's not a point I do a lot. You know, it certainly is one of the points in Worsley's, you know, external dragons treatments, right? What do they call it? Releasing the 7 dragons upon the 7 demons, right? And so basically, this is a point that you're dealing with helping the body to drive out any pathogenic factor or any internal pathogenic factor or external pathogenic factor that has taken over a person's energy system. And very briefly, I think about this one guy. He's a guy I was treating for, actually came in for MS, and he was in his 50s at the time. So he was about, maybe at the time he was about 10 years older than me. And he was from Romania, and he was in the Romanian army for a number of years. And he, at the time, that was under like kind of Soviet domination. And so he remembers, and he was sort of like in like the Romanian version of the special forces, right? This guy was like intense. And now he's like a computer programmer. It's kind of funny. But he was standing with his buddies in the wintertime in this river, like up to his waist in freezing cold water for like hours. I wasn't really clear like what they were doing, but he said over time he could feel the cold coming up his feet inside him, and he could feel it coming up his legs, and then gradually going over his knees, and then up into his hips, and then into his chest. And then he could start to feel this like squeezing around his chest. And then he felt like the cold then coming up into his neck. And he said, just when it was about to get to the head, they had everybody get out of the river. I think they were like, I don't know what they were doing. But anyway, it's not the water was coming up, but he said this inner sensation of cold. And he said it was something like, he said it was 8 years later, which I thought was interesting, cycles of 7 and 8. 8 years later, he was diagnosed with MS. It's really fascinating. So this is a point like that I always think about in terms of like, even not as a part of like EDs, but as a point that like it's servant's aid. So it's like it's aid for those who serve, right? It's support for those who support. It's really powerful for like driving out and dispelling anything that's like gotten like into the bones, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally. So physically, that would be like cold settling in. So there's a tremendous amount of stiffness, pain, fixed pains. In the mind, it's more like these powerful beliefs, ideas, stories that get into people's heads that make them just like a little bit off, right? Like everything's kind of going well, but they've got this one belief that like just, you hear it and you're like, that's really far out in left field, right? Yeah. So bladder 60, this is really a phenomenal point. Kunlun Mountain. It's a fire point. As such, it is really good to help stimulate the, no, wait, did I skip some? No, I didn't skip any. Okay. Yeah, right, 60. So Kunlun Mountain, this is the fire point. So this is a really nice point to stimulate the inner aspects of the fire, right? So we don't want the waters of our fluids to be too cold or too hot. Too hot, they start to steam. That steam goes up. We get agitated, either physically agitated, right? Like anybody who's ever had a urinary tract infection, it's not real easy to sit still, not super comfortable. Like you're not like, hey, let's all go out and like go for a walk, right? It's really agitating, physically agitating, mentally agitating. Similarly, if there's a lot of like mental heat, right, that's agitating, it's disorienting. So this is really nice, or we don't want it too cold either, right? We get funky cold edema, right? Pitting edema, you press down, but it doesn't respond back, right? So we don't want the fluids to be too cold, then they settle down into the bottom. This is where you get a lot of edema and swelling, the feet, the ankles, the legs, right? Maybe in the lower jowl, like during the menses. So we want that Goldilocks zone of just the right amount of heat, just the right amount of warmth to keep things flowing, but flowing smoothly in the right way, to keep things functioning and functioning in the right way. So all the body fluid. So this has a really nice, powerful effect on what happens in terms of like hot, cold symptoms that involve the fluids of the body, okay? On a mental, emotional level, the fires of life, the fire in the belly, it's what gives us a sense of courage. The courage to climb that Kunlun mountain. The old legend is this mountain that if you climb and you're able to reach the summit, you reach enlightenment. And really, I think that that's just sort of a metaphor for just climbing the mountain of our life. And when you reach the summit, when you're about to die, you've gained wisdom, maybe not necessarily great enlightenment, but at least you know a little something about something, right? And you know it in your bones. It's not just book knowledge. I mean, anybody can read a book and memorize a text, but how you apply that to your life, how you learn from your experiences, right? You've gone from bladder 67 to, through bladder 61, you've experienced a lot of stuff. You've been there, you got the t-shirt, right? And now you have to be able to apply that in life and still maintain your courage to keep climbing, right? So this is a really good point for people who are losing steam, lost their will, losing stamina, right? Life's is sort of wearing them down. They're not stuck, they're just tired, right? There's no spark or very little spark, right? There's not a lot of joy. They forget that, this can actually be an enjoyable experience. It doesn't have to be fiery, fun, ha all the time, right? Life's not always a comedy special on HBO, but it can be something that warms your spirit, that warms your heart, right? And maybe they've become very cold and inert. So what happens with cold and inert, right, as something freezes, it withdraws, right? So somebody may be retreating from life. Somebody may be sinking back in. If you think about also, I remember this one woman I met when I was in my 20s. She was a little bit older than me, and she'd had a series of really unpleasant relationships, and she described herself as frigid, physically and emotionally frigid. She couldn't really get excited about the idea of making love with somebody or being in a relationship with somebody. So this isn't the wounding of the heart protector. I've just been disappointed so much. It's more it's even more deeper than that. It's just I just don't even have it in me to even want to have a relationship. They've just retreated so much. They're just bone tired of the whole thing, right? Screw it. Yeah. So there's a sense of fatigue, a sense of resignation, not hopelessness. It's just you've lost will. You're just you don't have the energy and the chi to engage, not just in relationships, but in anything, right? Because life is relationships. So people are very becoming a hermit, retreated in their own safe little space that's easily known. There's no uncertainty. There's no surprises. There's no threat, right? But unfortunately, what does that become? It becomes a prison. All right. Let's see. Can I just keep going? Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So bladder 59, it's said to be the she cleft point of the yang motility vessel. That's one of the 8 extraordinary vessels. I don't really use it for that much. What I generally use it for is people who have a hard time physically being able to stand for a period of time, right? So also being able to extend up out of a chair, to get up out of a chair, get up out of bed, get up off the floor, this type of extension movement that's gone on for a really long time. It's some chronic low back issue. And if you image the head, neck, and torso onto the limbs, where the foot is the head, right? So the tip of the toe is the tippy top of the head, right? And then the lateral malleolus is C7, right? Bladder 59 is kind of that, upper mid back area. So this is really great for people who are kind of hunched over because they have a lot of upper mid back pain, right? Similarly, if you reverse that image, and again, I know this is a little bit confusing, but just go with me because we're going to explain this to you in another class later on. Bladder 59, the level of bladder 59 also is the area just above the lumbar region, like maybe like L1, T12, right? And that can be a region where if that kind of goes out, you know, then you get more problems like with the lower back. So this is a really nice point for people who, one, have a hard time getting up out of a chair, like these extension motions, right? Or standing for a long period of time. One, they run out of chi, right? I mean, it takes chi to support the head, neck, and torso and the body. And so, you know, people have become very like kidney chi deficient, right? So, or people have had some kind of like long-standing illness that has left them very weak and tired. Is everything okay? A bunch of people are starting to look distracted all of a sudden.
59 isn't on my notes. So
No, it's not in your notes.
Yeah, so I'm just writing a lot.
Okay, okay, good. All right. Okay, that's what it was. All right. Okay. Yeah, 59 is not in your notes. I apologize. So I'm winging it here a little bit. All right. So there's something called WEI, W-E-I, atrophy disorder. You don't have to really know so much about this. I'm never going to quiz you on it. But it's basically if there's been some long-standing B obstruction syndrome. So you get invaded by an external pathogenic factor, wind cold, wind heat, wind damp. The body isn't able to expel it. It goes in a little further. The body isn't able to transform it. It goes in a little further. The body isn't able to integrate it. It gets stuck somewhere. It gets stuck, and like, you know, that little piece of mold on the cheese in your icebox, right? I'm sorry, I'm dating myself. Your refrigerator, it starts to spread, right? Like that one moldy blueberry or strawberry, and then it spreads to the next strawberry and the next strawberry. And the next thing you know, you have WEI strawberry atrophy syndrome, where like the whole, like, you know, it's starting to deteriorate your nerves, the nerve cells, and your muscle fibers. And so what you get is weakness and numbness. And literally the body itself will start to look like it's withering, right? So when people come in with some kind of chronic neurological disorder where they've lost muscle tone, they've lost strength, right? It maybe looks like there's like the body is atrophying a little bit. Maybe one calf is bigger than the other. This is a really good point for that to treat like repeatedly over and over again, right?
Time?
Yes. Yes.
This course is an encyclopedia of information
I know.
with footnotes of your life experience plus application.
Yes. Well,
We have
we're not
two
getting into
assessments.
application. I'm giving you application as context.
Yes, it's good and it makes it real. But my
Okay.
concern is we have all of this knowledge, facts, observation, and two assessments. The specific question is, in applying what we're learning, what is the mindset we need to have for these two tests you're giving? That it's open resource, but we need to be familiar with where to find things, a general understanding and how we receive, what are we supposed to reflect in these assessments? Sorting through all this information.
So send me an email and I will, because I don't want to take up class time for this. Send me an email and I will get it to you somehow. I'll either send it to you in email or I'll post it on Canvas. Yeah.
You may just ask that question, but send it to you in writing so you have it.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
are you going to post it for everybody? Because I have the same
Yes.
question.
Same concern, not question, concern.
Well, just how to wrap your head around this much information.
Yeah.
Like, what is the kernel of importance?
Exactly.
Because
Right.
there's no way to memorize this.
There's no way.
That's why your test is open book.
Okay, so you want us, in reviewing, you want us to be familiar and start
I'll
to get
answer
our
this and get
own
that to you.
understanding.
Okay.
Okay, I'll write it.
Because I think we need to start studying now.
Yeah, that's my concern. Or at least going through organizing our notes or
Right.
something.
Right.
Yeah. I would have them organized by meridian. And if you can do
Okay.
that, you're fine.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Once you see the test, you'll be like, oh my God, this is okay. Yeah.
We're gonna be okay, all right.
I promise. I promise.
Okay.
But it's not just the test, how to use it even outside of the test.
Right.
Yes.
How do you want us to access this?
Yes, I
Because
will go.
it's
That's
an
a great
encyclopedia.
question. You email it to me or text it to me, and I will answer it in toto.
Yay.
All right. So just a few more points. Excuse me. So bladder 58. This is the junction point. Deadman calls it soaring upwards. I learned it as fly and scatter, which I kind of like that name, fly and scatter. It kind of reminds me of like, you know, the kid from Home Alone, right? When he realizes he's alone and, you know, and he's like running around, right? Or if you think about like people who are in a panic and they're just like running around, like, where are you going? I don't know. Right? That's kind of like what the bladder official person is doing, but on the inside, and they're trying to like white knuckle that to keep it from exploding out so everyone sees how completely nuts they feel. And for you water CFs, you know what I'm talking about, right? Like it's not easy to contain all that chi and all that nervousness and all that awareness that, you know, at any moment, something could strike. And so we are like constantly on alert, right? And so it takes a lot of chi to contain that, and sometimes we can't. And so this is a nice point on a physical level. Somebody comes in, like the main indications are a little bit boring, although it does treat hemorrhoids. Although I haven't really had a lot of success treating patients who have hemorrhoids with bladder 58, even bleeding it. So low points are traditionally done by bleeding. And so what you would do is you would put a cup on it, you get some blood up, you take the cup off, you puncture it, you put the cup back on, you suck some more blood out, not a lot, you know, maybe 1/8 of a teaspoon at the most, right? Maybe a little more if it's really dark. And so I think what they're talking about is like, again, at this point in the channel, you're dealing with things that like cold that has invaded the body and has become so chronic that it is transformed into heat. So the blood moves out the heat, and then the blood invigorates the blood in the channel, so that gets things moving. So this is often done for, again, like a lot of things affecting the bladder channel, pain in the occiput, pain in the neck, weight atrophy disorder. And I think they're looking at hemorrhoids as like heat kind of expanding the tissue out of the anus, right? And the bladder has a particular effect with the large intestine in the fluids of the lower jowl. So if you remember, just like if you're cooking fluids, right? If you've got like a what is that called, a pressure cooker, right? That steam expands and it puts pressure against the lid. So if the lid in this case is the sphincter of the rectum, right, it pushes that fluid out. That's why you got that, you know, piece of tissue that comes out of the rectum. So I think that's what they're talking about in terms of hemorrhoids. Not like a real common tool in my toolbox though. Like a lot of people don't come in with hemorrhoids. But you know, at least you'll have that. Me, I tend to do it more for people's energy on a physical level. They look like they're shaking, but maybe they're not, or maybe their lower body is constantly shaking and moving and their upper body is very still, and they look like they're, you know, in this constant state of wariness, threat. It's a low point, so it does invigorate the movement of the blood, which then relaxes the Shen, because the Shen is housed in the blood. So if the blood is, you know, if the blood is said to be toxic with like a lot of toxic heat, that can agitate the Shen. So another reason to bleed this point. In the clinic, you won't be bleeding so much, but you can sedate it, right? To vent these buildup of emotions, right? This buildup of emotions of fear, nervousness, feeling threatened, feeling uncertain, right? To vent these to the exterior, right? So this is a nice point to help like relax people, settle people into this place where they're not feeling like they're about to fly and scatter. Right? Really nice point for that. I'm just going to cover the next two, 56 and 57, very briefly. These are points that I do a lot in terms of orthopedics. On a physical level, I don't treat anybody with what's that called? Plantar fasciitis without treating these points. So these are fantastic points: supporting mountain and supporting muscles. Supporting muscles is bladder 56, supporting mountain is bladder 57. These are located on right in the center of the calf. So if you drew a line up from the Achilles tendon from the heel up towards the knee, towards the popliteal fossa, these are like, you know, there's like the two big muscles of the calf, the gastrocnemius muscle, right? So here's the leg, right? And then you're looking from the back, right? You're looking at me from the back of the leg, and then you've got these like gastrocnemius muscles, like right there in the center, right? Like in the back. And then right in between those muscles is bladder 56 and bladder 57, right? And these are like right in the seam of the heads of the gastrocnemius muscle. And these are very powerful points on a physical level, because what they do is, according to Jeffrey Yuen, they help to open, and by open, I mean to help allow and like facilitate the greater flow of qi through the area of the calf, of the low body, which are very susceptible to sort of latent cold. So in a way, like, you're going to discover later that the body stashes certain pathogenic factors in different areas of the body. And two of the areas where the body stashes cold is in the bones via the Liao points, and a Liao means crevice. So that would be like small intestine 18. That would be like bladder 31, 32, 33, 34, which are the sacral foramen points, right? You've got like the sacrum at the bottom of the spine, and then you've got these sacral foramen, which are basically it's a $10 word for hole in the bone. That's what a foramen is, right? So it's like this notch or hole or crevice. And similarly, like water always seeks its own level, cold does too. So it'll find its way into the bones and in certain areas of the body. And so if you think about like, if like things settle down to the bottom, the last big muscles there are before you get to the feet, which have no big muscles, are the calves. So like crap rolls downhill, like cold settles down into the bottom, and the area that's most susceptible to that place, like a bowl, like catching the cold, is the bowls of these two big calf muscles, the gastrocnemius muscles. So activating these points, also with electric stim, eventually when you can do this, activating these points is said to help disperse a lot of this cold, or the influences of cold, that have settled there and remained there latent for years and years and years and years. And so that tightens and tightens and tightens and tightens and tightens and tightens and tightens until at one point, oh, I can't take it anymore. Now I have plantar fasciitis. Now I've got some kind of chronic B obstruction syndrome, where some external pathogenic factor has like taken root and affected my system. So what you'll learn later in the 9th trimester is like, there's a way to like open this to help these external pathogenic factors escape the upper body and the lower body. The upper body is the sinuses. So you're going to eventually learn to do points around here to help open the sinuses, to help clear any external pathogenic factors out of the upper portion of the body. And you would treat these 2 points to help the body rid pathogenic factors that are stuck in the lower body, right? You don't have to know all that stuff. All you have to know is these 2 points help the body eliminate cold that's been stuck in the body for a long period of time, and it gets stuck in the gastrocnemius muscles. And from there, it creates a lot of havoc in the low body, especially the ankles and the feet, right? And the denser tissues, which are the ligaments, the tendons, right? So these help clear the lower orifices, and it also stimulates disinhibition, which is, so anytime you're disinhibiting something, you're promoting urination. So for those of you who eventually study herbs, anybody studying herbs yet? You guys aren't? Yeah, okay. Yeah, right, Michelle, you're in the herb class. So when they say promotes urination like a bland herb, right? that helps the body to disinhibit. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to be able to use the natural abilities of the bladder official to help leach this out of my body tissues, send it to the bladder so it can be excreted in the urine, right? And so these are very great points to help people with muscle problems or tendon problems that have come on from like some kind of overtaxation. It's not like, oh, they fell off their bike and hurt themselves. It's some kind of repetitive stress injury at work, or some kind of exercise or physical activity that they've done repeatedly for a long period of time, plus age equals need for bladder 56, 57, right? So these are often age-related, repetitive stress upon the, not just the muscles, but the sinews, compounded by long-standing internalized external pathogenic factors. How will you know it's a long-standing external pathogenic factor that's been internalized and made latent? Well, it gets better with heat, so that's cold. It gets better with cool, that's heat. It's worse in the cold weather, that's cold. It's worse in the hot weather, that's heat. It's worse when it's windy, that's wind. It's worse when it's damp and rainy, that's damp, right? This is not rocket science. You're not gonna be like, wow, how do I figure that out? It's basically what makes it better. It's the opposite of that, right? So whatever makes it worse, that's what it is. Whatever makes it better, it's the complement to that, right? So on a mental emotional level, these are the muscles that help us to stand erect in life and to powerfully move our legs forward, right? So in order to move this weight of our entire upper body, right, that's from like the bowl of the hips to the top of the head and our arms, in order to move that forward physically as well as in life, you've got to have some strong calves, right? So similarly, you have to have some strong mental calves, some strong spiritual calves. And what this means is you have to have the fortitude, right, and the resources. So supporting muscles. Okay, these are the tools I have to like get stuff done in the world. Supporting mountain, that's my being, right? That's the mountain of my being that we're climbing in Kunlun Mountain, right? That's your potential, right? And so you're supporting the resources, the inner and outer resources, you know, your inner virtues, your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, to be the best you can be, right? Like in the Army. All right. So I want to skip over to bladder 54 and then we'll take a short break. And actually, you know what? I'm going to, instead of breaking out into a group today like I did last time, I'm going to spare you and I'm going to have you guys, I'm going to have you guys break into groups and do this for like the discussion that's due later on. So that'll save you some time like sitting in front of a computer. How's that? Is that okay? You guys all right with that? Completely disappointed. Okay. All right. So bladder 40, I learned it as bladder 54, equilibrium middle. I think, what does Deadman call it? I can't remember what Deadman calls it. It's something in the middle. Central something, central equilibrium. I don't have it in front of me. Let me see if it's in this other book.
Middle of the crook.
Middle. What do you have?
Middle of the crook.
Middle of the crook, yeah. Right, middle of the crook, equilibrium middle, that's fine. So this is the earth point. This is the point right in the center. It's not in the center of the popliteal fossa. It's if you put a hand on the inside of the leg and the outside of the leg, it's not always in the center. What it is in the center of is the two tendons that run on the medial and lateral aspects of the popliteal fossa, right? It's always between those two. if I couldn't bleed this point anymore, if someone says, nope, sorry, man, you can't do this point anymore, you can't bleed anymore, I would give up practice. This is such a phenomenal point to needle and bleed. This is, so you'll learn that there's a number of command points for different areas of the body, as well as influential points. So this is the command point for the low back. This is the influential point of the low back, right? If you think about imaging, right, the head, neck, and torso onto the limbs, so the elbow crease and the popliteal crease, right? What do they call this? The cubital crease and the popliteal crease represent the waistline from CV8 to DO4, okay? And so obviously by virtue of its imaging, this is really good for anything that's going on at the waist level, front or back, especially back, right? Because like treats like. So, you know, posterior treats posterior as well as anterior. And so this is a classically indicated point for low back pain, especially when there's the stagnation of cold. So anytime you've got any kind of stagnation of chi or blood, bleeding is always recommended. And I'm going to do a special bit on this in 2 other courses later on. One you'll get in the 7th trimester, Advanced Treatment Techniques, and the other, if you take it, the Pain Management course in the 9th trimester. So it's the earth point. So if you think about equilibrium middle or center of the crook, they're also alluding to the qualitative aspects of the earth, which represent our center, right? It's the center jiao, right? The earth, the stomach and spleen are at the center of the 3 jiao. It also helps us be the center, like the earth is the center, right? In the old days, the 5 elements were, there was fire, right? Then there was water, wood, fire, and metal, and earth was in the center, right? It governed the transitions, right? We went from winter to spring, transition to summer, transition to fall, transition to winter. So, and we thought that the earth was like the center of our universe. And in a way it is, because like you're seeing the world from inside yourself, right? You are the center of your solar system and the universe that revolves around you in a way, and that can be healthy. So this also provides center. Earth banks water. Earth controls via the co-cycle the water, so it banks it, it holds it, it stabilizes it, because when water is properly banked, it can then proceed with power. It's not just flooding and eroding everywhere, right? So this is a great, and we get our power from the center of our low back, right? That's where our power comes from. Anyone who's done any kind of martial arts or dance knows everything comes from like the low back and the hips, the dantian. All of your movements with power and grace stem from this central place. And so this is a great point for helping people in this area physically, as well as on a mental emotional level, connecting people back to their earth, which then is nurturing, nourishing, supporting, right? Stomach and spleen provide all of the chi and energy that we would need, right? It combines it with the lungs and then with the original source chi to become, you know, the chi and blood that we use, the zheng chi, right? So this is really good for people who are never able to really experience the fruits of their labors, right? They're not getting the chi out of all of their work, right? They're not getting the harvest. They're not getting the sweetness that comes from all of their endurance and perseverance, right? They're never able to like kind of stop and pause and reflect and feel the comfort that comes from all of the work and the benefits of the work that they've done, right? It's always about the mission, the task, right? The next thing, the next big discovery, the next advancement, right? It's always about rolling forward, like in this torrent of a wave, right? But every wave really needs to hit a beach, right? And then go back out into the sea. And just like the Hasi point, this is where the chi is said to plunge back into the interior, right? To go back into the abyss to be recycled, right? So similarly, this is a point that helps us to rest, not just in the way that the water point 66 does. You know, because again, the water provides all of the water point provides all of the virtues of the water: restoration, rejuvenation, cleansing, refreshment. This is more about finding our beach where we can finally relax. Like the work is, this portion of the work is complete. It's done. I can settle now. I can enjoy the fruit, the little fruits there were, and reflect and savor, right? This is about savoring. So, you know, all of that work overtaxes us. And then, you know, what's the primary, there's two primary symptoms of kidney qi deficiency and depletion. Do you remember what they are?
Overwork is one.
No, what's the result of the overwork? What's the physical manifestation symptoms?
A sore lower back.
Sore lower back, weak lower back. What's the other one?
Knees, weak knees.
Weak and sore knees. And this point's good for both, right? It's the switch that's in the local area of the lamp, and it's the switch that has the electrical cord that goes to the lamp that the light shows up in the low back, right? So this is a great point for people who are like overtaxing themselves. They need to learn boundaries. Hey, you know what? It's 1 a.m. Stop working. Right? Boundaries. Sorry, I'll get back to you over the weekend. Right? Like I didn't want to use up the resources of the time and attention on the website on the Zoom meeting to answer a very absolutely perfect, excellent, valuable question. But I needed to import boundaries to say, okay, no, this at this time at this place, right? Does that make sense? Right? That's an example of that. So some people have no boundaries in terms of their expenditure of qi, right? Earth helps to provide boundaries. Like, you know, when your mom calls you, like, you know, 5 times a day, how do I turn on my computer again? Wait, what's a cursor? Okay, you take your cursor. What's a cursor? How do you cut and paste? What's an address bar? Like, oh my God, like you can't call me at 8 a.m. to talk about this. Like, right? Right? So this is for people who's like their qi is just flooding everywhere. Right? All right. So so that's all I have for like the command points. I will create some very short burst videos on the AEPs, the outer bladder line points, and some other notable points on the bladder channel, particularly like the head and bladder 1. I don't want to force you to sit in front of this computer. It's already been a little over 2 hours. I think we're all kind of done. So in terms of the discussion, I will email that to you as well as post it in an announcement, and as well as give you a better understanding of the final exam and the midterm exam and what you need to know and how to best do the midterm and final. I'll put that in an announcement as well, and then I'll also email it to everybody. Is that cool? All right. So I just want to leave a few minutes for some questions.
Can you come back to the discussion post from last week? I think you said we would do that.
Oh, yes. So let me stop the recording here.